And what kind of illness is it inherited, or does it grow out of the experiences of life, or both? What causes schizophrenia? Research scientists are looking for the answer. Explorers, searching along the crisscrossed shadowy trails into the... Is the answer to be found in some disturbance in the family relation, or in a flaw that throws the senses into chaos, playing havoc with vision and taste and touch and smell? Or is it due to a chemical in the... Among biochemists exploring this crucial question, there is much conflicting evidence. One researcher probing into the biochemical and neurophysiological area is Dr. Robert Heath, chairman of the Department of Psychiatry and Neurology at Tulane University in Louisiana.
As we've studied these patients in detail, the fundamental consistent abnormality seems to be a deficiency in their feeling mechanism, particularly in their ability to feel pleasure. And we began looking specifically to see if there was any part of the brain which might have to do with the expression of feelings, the expression of emotion, and level of awareness. Now, in order to get at this question, in order to explore it, we had to develop new techniques, and this involved the development of techniques for implanting electrodes into these precise regions deep in the brain so that we could sample the activity that was going on. We first perfected these techniques in animals, these techniques for implanting electrodes accurately and leaving them in place for significant periods of time. And after doing that, we felt that this sort of an approach offered enough of a therapeutic or treatment possibility that we were warranted in going ahead and implanting these electrodes into very sick schizophrenic patients, patients who had failed to respond to all existing treatments.
One of the first to be chosen for this operation was Annadelle. On October 18, 1950, they implanted an electrode in her brain and gave her one stimulation. 1 month later.
I love macaroni. Mother never do cook macaroni. I don't know when the day she cooked macaroni. Macaroni, spaghetti, and mashed potatoes. She never did cook it. The same old thing, rice. Rice, 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 doing nuts.
6 months after.
Have you had anything which has been disturbing you?
Mm-mm.
15 months later.
He said, don't feel bad about it. Yeah, and he looked like he felt sorry for it.
It sounds like you did pretty well.
I get by. I get by.
2 years later, Annadelle wept. She knew her symptoms were coming back. And gradually she did return to her original condition. The researchers knew that their work had brought only a brief respite from tragedy, and that they must work on to try to find a more lasting treatment.
We thought we could do it with one stimulation. It did hold for quite some time in this first patient, but on the next couple of patients, it didn't last as long. We therefore wondered if by leaving the electrodes in position, provide us with an opportunity to re-stimulate, if we couldn't continue to eliminate the psychotic symptoms or reduce them with this treatment method.
The electrodes were left in Julius for a year, and he was given multiple stimuli. They were removed 10 years ago.
Well, I have a better outlook on life now than I did before. I don't feel anyone is against me. I'm not depressed. I've gone back to my writing. I used to write poetry, and I've written about 200 since I had the operation, which I memorized. I mean, that's all right.
And how do people seem to you?
Everybody treats me fine. I'm with my family. I have 9 children, and we have no trouble at all.
However, Julius was an exception. Most patients were not able to retain the benefits even with the multiple stimuli.
We're also interested in knowing what the effects of stimulation of other precise regions of the brain would be, whether that too would remove the psychotic symptoms and produce pleasure, or whether it might have another type of effect. When you have your choice there, what one do you like to push?
I like to push this one here.
What's that do?
That gives me a very good feeling. Very good.
In addition to this finding of a pleasure response to stimulation, we also were able to determine that this region was misfunctioning. Now, this was determined by making electrical recordings from these precise regions within the brain. We found that when the patients were psychotic, that there was an abnormal electrical activity in these precise regions. It was after we had consistently noted this correlation that we began looking for some basic factor that might be responsible for this abnormality of the brain, this abnormality that was basic to the psychotic state. Now, in these studies, the first thing that we did was to look at the blood, studied the blood, to see if there might be a difference in the way in which the blood of schizophrenics, in contrast to the blood of normals, metabolized the chemicals that were known to be released with stress. And we found that the serum of schizophrenics oxidized adrenaline more rapidly than the serum of normals, fairly consistently. Now, the next thing we did was to get out the particular fraction of that serum which was responsible for this increased oxidation. This fraction we named taraxine because it was a simple short name that we could put on it, and this word is derived from the Greek and it means disorganization of the mind. So we took this fraction. It was a very crude fraction. We introduced it into monkeys with the electrodes implanted into precise regions, and when we did give it intravenously to these monkeys, it produced an abnormal electrical activity in the same region of the brain that we had recorded from the patients when they were showing psychotic symptoms. And these monkeys displayed catatonic symptoms. They became reduced in their level of awareness and dazed and out of contact. These monkey tests with taraxine were certainly interesting, provocative, and highly suggestive, but they weren't conclusive.
We've made many more tests, but we've still got a long way to go. We feel our ability to obtain a chemical factor in the blood of schizophrenics and demonstrate how it affects the brain as a step towards a concrete definition of the disease. Another great step forward will come when and if we can come up with a successful blood test to demonstrate the presence of this chemical in schizophrenic patients.
We once found out specifically what this disease was, we would then be on the road for evolving a specific treatment, something which we haven't even closely approximated as of this time.
But other researchers feel that the most promising leads lie elsewhere. They believe that while biochemical effects may be found in schizophrenia, the cause is not biochemical. Some researchers feel it will be found within the individual himself. Others believe that one must look beyond the individual alone and study his relationships to other people. They believe a disturbance in these relationships may be an important factor in schizophrenia. One of the most crucial relationships, of course, is within the family unit, where people first learn to communicate their emotions and thoughts. Dr. Lyman Wynn, Chief of Adult Psychiatry at the National Institute of Mental Health, together with Dr. James Stabenow and others, are studying the patterns and significance of these relationships.
Over the years, we've studied many families, those with a schizophrenic child and those whose offspring are normal. We matched them as closely as possible for sex, age of the child, economic level, and cultural background. And then we seek to discover what the differences are in the way they behave toward each other, the way they think and feel, the way they talk to each other and relate to each other.
We have chosen to explore this with what we call the Revealed Differences test. The Revealed Differences test is a measure of family interaction.
We pose questions to each of these family members individually to find issues on which they differ.
The first question this morning is, children should not be interested in the private affairs of their parents which do not concern them. Should be or should not be?
Should not be.
I think they should be interested.
I think they should be. They should have some interest in it. I think that's part of growing up, to find out what's going on.
try to come to an agreement on one answer to the question. I'll leave a pencil here, and you can indicate the answer then that you've come to agreement upon.
Mm-hmm.
The question is deliberately ambiguous. How will the family go about resolving it?
I'll read it again, if I may. Children should not be interested in the private affairs of their parents, which do not concern them. How do you feel about that?
I thought they should be, because it's part of their growing up, and they would be interested. They're interested in the parents as people, and they would be interested in what happened to them.
How do you feel, Lee?
Well, certain problems they should be interested in, and certain problems they should know about.
I think that's the way I feel. Children just are not prepared sometimes to comprehend what is going on, especially with you and me. And the only result that I can see sometimes would be to upset the children.
Well, that's true.
In certain types of problems.
Yeah, they get upset, but they are, I mean, it's normal for them to be interested.
Oh, I think so too, but should they become involved, I think
No,
not.
they shouldn't help make the decision or...
I think it depends on the problem.
Exactly. That's the way I think I feel. So then
yeah,
relate
well,
back to
probably not.
Probably not in certain types of problems, so I think we can all agree on that,
Mm-hmm.
can we not?
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree, Lee? You agree? I agree.
Children should not be interested in the private affairs of their parents which do not concern them. Do you think they should be or should not be?
It should not be.
Financial, I would say yes, otherwise no.
I would say should be or should not be.
Should be financially, other matters no.
So you'd say should be with some reservation? Or
okay,
what?
put it that way. Fine.
Well, I could answer that two ways. First of all, one might think that certain things are not within the province of a child's understanding. I believe that children should know a good bit about what goes on. As for very, very, very personal things, no, I think a child should not be over-curious. But I really feel that many things people keep from children, children are entitled to know.
Well, now, if we could settle on just one of these answers, which would you think would be most satisfactory for yourself? That they should not be interested in the private affairs of their parents, or that they should be?
I think they should be.
We find that there seems to be a difference in the way a family with a schizophrenic child focuses on a question of this kind.
Mary, why do you feel that children should not be interested in the affairs of their parents?
Oh, because it's none of their business.
Well, that depends on what you're talking about. I qualified my answer by saying that they should be interested in their parents' financial affairs, but that there were other matters that they shouldn't have any interest in. He put it down as a qualified no.
Yeah, but you always told me that you weren't going to tell me how much money you made.
When you were a child, that's true, because I know that children sometimes don't have judgment enough not to repeat things like that in the wrong place.
Well, we are speaking to children, aren't we?
Well, yes. In other words, you're making an issue of the wording of the question where it says matters that don't concern the child.
Well, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But still, Mary, the way the question is, children should not be interested. But I think in looking at the question, rereading the question, children should not be interested. Most children, whether they should be or not, have a natural curiosity. And I think, generally speaking, most children are, don't you? Well, honey, what?
That's interesting. It's interesting the way the question is worded, because it says children should not be interested. recall when I answered it privately that I took it to mean that the parents shouldn't tell the child. That isn't what it says at all,
You do
really.
take it that way sometimes, don't you?
No, it says children should not be interested. Well,
I really believe that a child who is not interested is the exception. He might not show his interest.
is that the question, or is the question whether he should be?
I think he should be, because if he isn't, I don't think he's normal.
Are you always interested in the affairs of other people?
In a family with a schizophrenic child, we find certain patterns emerging. The discussion often tends to get vague. There are self-contradictions and interruptions. Opinions are left hanging. Children, depending upon their sensitivity, react with different intensity to these family patterns.
Truthfully, Doctor, many times we could not get together. Now, I suppose many times I didn't have an open mind, because many of my convictions are very, very strong. Many of his are, too.
I think that, in general, I have an open mind. I know that you have accused me of not having an open mind merely because I would not agree with you. And if I
Because
said...
you wouldn't listen, honey.
But I did listen. I knew what you were going to say.
That's it. You knew what I was going to say, but many times you didn't know what I was going to say.
Mother, you think in the same patterns all the time. And it's very easy to predict what you're going to say. I mean, sometimes a person will illustrate something which seems to have nothing to do with it. But yet, her I know, when she starts off on a completely different subject, which slightly relates to the subject, that usually means that she's off the track. And I don't feel like listening to her.
At this point, all of our studies are after the fact. The child is already schizophrenic and the family relationships are established. Only when we can follow families of all kinds from birth on and see whether or not there is a consistent and different pattern in the behavior of those families whose children grow up to become schizophrenic adults, only then will we truly be able to answer the question of cause and effect in schizophrenia.
The question of cause and effect reaches into every area of research. We know, for example, that a schizophrenic perceives the world differently than we do. But is this a cause or an effect of schizophrenia? How is this perceptual loss related to their emotional turmoil? Each of us is unique, and to some extent we each perceive the same scene differently, depending on who we are. Some see power and action. Some are fascinated by machines. Others are interested in people. For some, there is only destruction. For others, great beauty. But all of us share in common a sense of depth, color, texture, on which we can rely. Schizophrenics do not share this with us. For them, this same scene may have no depth or perspective. It is just flat, two-dimensional. Their world may be totally without color, nothing but black and white. Can these distortions in perception affect what they feel about people? In our stable world, we depend on a lot of simple, commonplace things like depth and color, and we rely on them to be very much the same each time. But in a schizophrenic's world, things aren't the same each time, and he can never be certain how they will change from one moment to the next. Does schizophrenia create this unreliable, distorted world? Or does the impact of living in such a world bring on schizophrenia? To investigate this further, researchers are using hypnosis to reproduce similar perceptual distortions in normal volunteers. If they succeed, will John develop symptoms that mimic schizophrenia? Will he become hostile, unable to relate to people, unsure of his own body? Working on this with Dr. Osmond is Dr. Bernard Aronson. He has been hypnotizing John over a period of 6 months so that he can hypnotize him with one word.
Okay, are you ready for today? Sure, I'm always ready for today. Okay. Gracias.
Nobody but Dr. Aronson saying this word to John will be able to hypnotize him or affect him in any way.
All of your memories of all previous hypnotic sessions are fading away. They're fading away. They're fading away. They're fading away. They're gone. You remember nothing about any previous hypnotic session. When I wake you up, the dimension of depth will be gone. There will be no depth. The dimension of depth will be gone. There will be no depth. You won't remember that I told you this, nor will you remember anything about this hypnotic induction. But these instructions will affect till I take them off. Wake up. Are you having trouble orienting the match? Are you having trouble orienting the match?
No, I just don't feel very well.
Lifeless.
Flat.
Lifeless. Flat.
Yeah,
How do you
just what I said.
tell me a little more about it?
What's... It's almost like things were two-dimensional. I mean, I look at my hand and it doesn't seem to have any relation to my body, really. Feet.
Your hand has no relation to your body.
I mean, you know. I mean, I can look at the arm, the hand, and see that it's all connected, but
They aren't you.
I don't feel this. You know, I mean, I have sensation.
Why not?
I don't know where I am in relation to other things, really.
Look over at me. How do I look?
Sort of far away and cold. You don't look particularly friendly or warm. I don't feel as if I can relate to you at all.
Let's try and see how well you can walk.
How do you feel?
I can't see things properly.
Well, how do things look?
Flat.
Flat?
Absolutely
How do I look?
flat. Just flat, like a picture.
Like a...
It's like almost like a black and white picture.
Well, that's quite a loss for an artist like yourself, not to be able to see things in perspective.
So it's a loss for anybody with eyes.
After John's sense of depth is restored, another experiment begins. This one relates to a schizophrenic's distorted sense of past and future. If you don't know where you've been, and you don't know where you're going, then who are you?
Do you know how we usually divide time into the categories of past, present, and future? When I wake you up, there will be no future. The future will be gone. There will be no future. Wake up.
how do you feel?
Wonderful.
In what way?
Hmm?
Well, how do you mean you feel wonderful?
Oh, I just feel wonderful, that's all. Is it important why, really?
Well, sometimes it's important to know why. What's different? What's different?
Different than what?
Usual.
Well, I think I always feel pretty good.
What do you have to do tomorrow?
Go to work, I guess.
What
I don't
are you
have
doing
to, though.
then?
I could stay home.
That's right.
Because they don't know where I am anyway, you know, so.
How do you feel? How would you describe your feelings right now?
I think I feel a little bit elated, really.
Mm-hmm. Why?
The trouble with you psychologists. You can't just sit down and enjoy yourself. You got to ask why. How do you feel?
Oh, I feel fine.
You look good.
I really look good. Okay, I'll accept that. I like looking good. Okay, Perseus. When I wake you up, the future will have returned. The future has returned. Past, present, and future are all there. Wake up. How do you feel?
Why'd you want to go and do that for?
Why?
I was having a good time.
Is there anything else about this?
Well, I seem to appreciate things in the here and now more than I usually do. Everything was pleasant to look at, and to touch, and to listen to, and
so if you
things
can
were
really,
good, you know.
If you can really manage to live in the present, then
you got it made.
You've got it made.
Yeah.
All right. Would you like to try another one?
Yeah.
Do you know how we divide time into the three categories of past, present, and future?
Yes.
When I wake you up, the past and the future will both be gone. The past and the future will both be gone. There'll be neither past nor future. You won't remember that I told you this, nor will you remember anything at all about this hypnotic induction. These instructions will remain in effect until I take them off. Wake up. John, wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. John? Wake up. Dr. Osmond?
John, can you hear me? How are you feeling? John? How are you feeling? Take a look at me. Can you hear me, John? Give a little nod if you can.
Would you like to sit down? I think I ought to take him out of this. Perseus, the past and the future have both returned. The past and the future have both returned. Past, present, and future are all here. All of your memories of all previous hypnotic experiences are returning. They're returning, they're returning, they're back. You can remember everything about all previous hypnotic experiences. How do you feel? Do you feel any residuals in this experience? What? You feel frightened? Fear is going away. It's going away. You can feel it going away. You feel confident. You feel better now? All right, now you can remember everything about this experience and everything about the induction. Going to wake you up in a moment. You'll wake up feeling relaxed, alert, confident, unafraid. Wake up.
Dr. Osmond.
How are you?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. Very glad to be with you.
It felt like not being with us, did it?
It felt like not being nowhere, Dr. Osmond.
When I talked to you, you heard my voice, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Where did it seem to come from then?
I don't know. You just don't care when you're like that. There's nothing to care with. And it's not scary until you wake up. You're not frightened.
That's very queer.
Because there's no feeling.
Uh-huh.
Not at all. And that's, I guess, what is the scariest part, the fact that you're not a human being. Not at all.
What are you then at that time?
I don't know. You're nothing.
John can be brought out of this terrible world with one word. But for the schizophrenic, we do not hold the word.
The producer planned to show some scenes of Renee going out on a date, as she has been doing for some time. But unfortunately, the date turned out to be an appointment with me. I have just seen Renee, and her symptoms have come back. She is full of worries and fears, and she was desperate to go home. I therefore advised her to go home to her parents, which she did. I will do my best to help Renee, and in time I hope she will recover.
What is the cause of schizophrenia? Is it biochemical or environmental or a combination of both? And what is the cure? So the research continues, trying this possibility and that, searching for the key or keys that will free the prisoners from their own prison. We offer her our world, a world of pain and cruelty, beauty and love, a world with some happiness. Now we must find a way to help her live in it.